Hello, everybody. This is Amer Iskandar, and in today's session, we're going to talk about migrating from pipelines into controllers. So the very good question. Oh, okay, let me admit this one. Okay, so we all should ask ourselves that why we need to do that, why we need to migrate from pipelines into controllers. There are three main points. The first one is that the controllers have a better performance than the pipelines and the better execution time as well. So there's also a really good technique in controllers. For example, we use a require method instead of like import script or import a package. Also, second point is that for in controllers, we have a usability, a reusable functionality. Reusable functionality such as the modules and models, and also views. Modules or models. We have models in controller that holds all the classes and methods and helper methods. Yeah. Also, regarding to why we need to migrate from pipeline to controllers, the controllers are good friendly for developer, are code friendly for developer. The controllers are server-side scripts, as we all know, that handle storefront requests. So they are JS files, whereas, as you can see here, the pipelines are XML files. So they only can be visualized in UX Studio as a workflow. So as you can see here, this is a pipeline. Let's take an example, which is an address pipeline. It consists of each line of these called sub-pipelines. Each sub-pipeline consists of start node and end of the flow, as you can see here. Okay, so this is an XML file, whereas the pipelines are JS files. The controllers are JS files, and they are code friendly for developers. Also, pipelines are deprecated, and they will not be supported in the near future. So, okay, let's dig deeper into the process of migration. So the very first step we need to take off that we need to create a package for the controllers, which called like your project name underscore controllers. This is the convention name of this package. Then you need to add this package into package path in Business Manager. Okay. Now, regarding to the package path, you can put it anywhere you want, because the SFCC environment always that give the priority for the controllers package. So always the controller package overrides the pipeline package. So okay, for migrating rules, the second step is to create the structure folders. Then we can create cartridge. Under cartridge, we have controllers folder. Then we can here create the new controller. Should be a .js. It should also follow the common JS standard. Okay, now you keep in mind that the new controller should have the same name as the equivalent pipeline. Also should have each sub-pipeline here in the pipeline represent a method in the controller. So each one should have also the same name. Each one of call node in the sub-pipeline should have the same name as the controller's methods. Okay. So okay, let's dig deeper. Actually, let's in the migration process should follow step by step. From taking this pipeline and then take the first sub-pipeline and walk through all the sub-pipeline step by step. Okay, so let's take the first one, okay, and walk it through step by step. The first thing we need to take off is to create the new controller. I just take the controller here, as you can see. This controller should be start with use restrict. Use restrict is mean that I just defined that the JavaScript should be executed in restrict mode, which means that, for example, for undefined variables, we cannot use any undefined variables. There's a lot of rules under strict mode. It's just an standard JS, a common JS standard. The second, then you need to add the JS docs for controller. JS docs, which means that we need to identify what this controller does. Also, before each method, we need to add the JS docs as well. Okay, now let's go ahead to the first one. We need to take this sub-pipeline and convert it into a method. Each sub-pipeline, as I mentioned, that is represent a method. Okay, now let's take a list. Here we go. Okay, this is the list method. First, we need to add the JS docs. Then we need to define the list method. The name should be the same as I mentioned, but in the declaration we need to put it in small. Start with a small letter. Okay. Then we can extend it. We can export it in as we can see here in a capital letter. Okay. Now let's go back to the list. We here in the properties tab, we have a configuration for this first node. This is a call node, and it's a public. This parameter should be like an HTTPS. Sorry, this is a parameters, and there is a secure connection required. How we can represent this in controllers? Now, the public means that we can extend this, export this. Sorry, we can export this to the global context, which means that I can access the list function from anywhere I want, from any place, such as like controllers or request URLs. So here I need to export it as this is the good practice thing, as capital letter. So we use guard for this in order to give some restrictions for public methods. Now, for guard, it's a module. We can find them. Sorry, these folders can find them from the site Genesis controller. So from the site Genesis site. In the scripts, we need to copy some portions. This need to be take in mind that we need to take apps and the guard and the meta JS. If they are don't exist in our pipeline project. Okay, let's move forward. Now, I will represent the public with export. I need to export this function because it's public. There is no parameters mentioned in this start node, so I don't need to mention any parameter. If you need to mention any parameter here, just to add this, as you can see here, like I need to mention the name, okay, as what I need. Okay. The second thing is the secure HTTP required. This is some restrictions that can guard give us is to add this string as HTTPS into parameters, and by default it should be get, except for processing or handling the form should be post. Also, there is another thing like login. This call node should be called once that the user is authenticated and logged into his account. So we can migrate this. How we know that this should be migrated is using the account required login. This node cannot be accessed throughout any guest users. So once you see this node, you need to add logged in string into pass it as a parameter into ensure of guard method. So we are now migrated the first start node, which is called node list, into our controller. Okay, let's go ahead and see what's this is a assign node. Assign node, which means that there is I just assign a variable, a value to this variable. This value is a string value. It's address / list to this variable target pipeline. Okay, let's go back to the list function. Here, actually, because we don't use this variable throughout this pipeline, sub pipeline, so this is because it's out of the box. So we need to follow the standard JS command standard JS. So we don't need to keep it because this will not be used throughout this sub pipeline. Now we get migrated this node. Now for any pipelet, this is called pipelet. For any pipelet that we need to migrate, we need to find the equivalent JavaScript code for it. In FCC documentation, we have this list of pipelets. All the pipelets here. Then we need to migrate each pipelet. We need to find each pipelet here and then take the equivalent JavaScript or job step for it. Let's take an example for the update page metadata. Okay. So, now we need to use like request.get page metadata. In the controllers, as we said, we have reusable functionality. So we need to use models and modules and also views. What is models? It is like we have a helper, like a JS helpers or class helper classes and helper methods. Each each like each area has its own model, such as content, such as address, cart. All of these models are extended from abstract model. Just we give some object oriented here, and also if I got this content model, okay, I will find that then if you use get here, okay, then we are using the get model, the get content here, as you can see. Now, for more easiest thing and for more um, use for the functionality, we use models to get the content, and then we send this content, as you can see here, in the Biblet node. We have some dictionary attribute, which is content. We need update the page metadata with this content. So how would you do that? Do this in controllers? We use the app model content. This will get the content that we need to update the metadata with, and then uh, get the content into this. After that, we use the page meta to update the content with this content, the page with this content. Okay. After this, we are using at the end of this sub pipeline, we are using interaction node, which means that we are loading. This used for loading. This is useful for to load the templates, the ISML templates. Okay. How we can load a templates or ISML templates? We use app.view, which means that hey, give us the ISML view. Then we need to call render method in order to do that. Any questions so far? Okay. Let's move forward. Okay. Keep in mind that when you are in migrating process from pipelines into controllers, just to call controller from controller, because in this case we need to avoid circular dependencies. Also avoid to call pipeline from controller, and as well as for pipelet from controller. But if there is no, if you didn't find any equivalent JavaScript code for any pipelet, you can use it directly, as this has been mentioned in the SFCC documentation here. If a pipelet doesn't have an equivalent script method, then you can call the pipelet directly. But as I said, this is not a good practice way. Okay, let's go forward for, let's take another pipeline, another sub pipeline. Okay, let's have this one, get address details. We need to take this one. Okay. First of all, we need to name it as the first as the call node, and then it's public, as you can see here. So we can export it. As you can see here, we use guard to give it some restrictions, such as get and HTTPS and logged in. It's a get. Why? It's HTTPS because it's set here in the configuration secure connection required. Um, Also, we have here for the next node, we have here a get customer address. This get customer address, if you go to the sorry, if you go to the list of pipelets that we need to find the equivalent JavaScript code, we can find this one. This is a customer.addressbook.get address. Okay, we have another rule here that in pipelines, we have a predict object. Predict object, which means that this is a pipeline dictionary object, but it holds all the variables throughout the sub-pipeline. And also, by default, it holds some out-of-the-box variables, such as the current user, the current customer, the current session, the current request, the current forms. How we can migrate these variables into controller by default, like in controllers, the SFCC defines these variables as the global variables. So we can, instead of use the current session, we can use session. Instead of current request, we can use request. Just remove the current word. So here, but except for current forms, we need to use this as the session.forms. Okay, let's go back to this function. Now the next step is get the customer address. As we see here, as we saw here, this is from the customer.addressbook.get get the address. Okay, now we use here an address book. How we get the address book? It's from customer. As we said, we have a current customer in the pipeline as an input, and we have an address ID. We get the current customer. How we migrate current customer? We migrate it as the customer. Then .profile.address book, we get the address book. Then we get the address from sending the request.http parameter.id.value. In this step, as we saw here, we just copy and paste it into this line. After this step, we are calling an interaction node. This will load ISML template, which is address JSON. We use it as first we get the view, then we are rendering address JSON. Now, this address JSON is using an address as an input. If you can see here, you need also to check if it's using any input. Yes. Yeah, this is a predict. This is a pipeline dictionary object, and how we can pass it to this ISML template. We use we are sending it by this object as an object. We send it this variable as an object, okay, in the getView app method. Okay, let's get another example for address. Let's take this sub pipeline, for example. Okay, first of all, we have a public. Okay, before I start with this pipeline, anyone has any question? Do you have any question, guys? No. Okay. Yeah. Okay, no questions. Let's start with this sub pipeline. This sub pipeline will do adding a process for this for the address. Now, as you can see here, this is also public call node. Then there's an assignment, assign node. Then it will require login. Then we will clear the form that the user has populated. It's his address. Then we have here also interaction continue node. This will also load the XML template. Okay. Now let's start with the first node. Here's the add. It's a public. We can export it. Then we have parameters. We don't have any parameters. We have a secure connection required. We can represent this as we mentioned before in the add. It should be in a capital letter, and the method should be in a small letter. We need to mention that it's logged in because of that is required login. Logged in means that if any guest user try to access this method, then it will get redirected to login page. So God give us some restrictions to give this method for public methods. Okay, now we have the add. We just put the the docs.js. Then we need to get the profile. Okay, as you can see here, we need as step by step. First of all, we have done with the call node. Then for the assign node, which means that I just assign these two variables with these two values. Now, if these variables will not be used throughout this pipeline, we need to remove them as the common JS standard. Also, if this variable is using by any template here, we will pass it by a get view, as we see here. This is the add. Okay. This variable will not be used throughout this sub pipeline. This variable is used in this XML template. So we need to pass it as a variable in an object throughout this get view. Now, okay, let's move forward. Then we have required login. As I mentioned, we put the logged in string in the card here. Yeah. Okay. After this, in the pipeline, we do a clear form element. This is a pipelet. We need to go to the equivalent one to get it, which means that we need to clear form element. Now, as I mentioned that controllers provide us some modules and models that we can use. You can get them from if your project or if your pipeline project does not have any models or any modules, you can get them from SiteGenesis, or you can create them. They are a pretty straightforward JS. They are collections of classes and methods that will help you, just like helper classes and methods. Okay. Now we use this profile as module, and then we clear it. This will represent it from clear form element. As we hear, this is the same as this line of code, which is app.getForm profile.clear. Now, then after this, we get load this ISML. This ISML, it's address details using this interaction continue node. What is the difference between interaction node and interaction continue node? Interaction node will only load the ISML. Interaction continue node will load the ISML that contains the form or any action that will continue from the continue node. Okay, we will start from not the call node, from the continue node. It will handles all the actions from the form. Okay, now we will render it using the kit view to render, as well as then we need to send this parameter. This parameter that will be populated in the forms action. Okay, let's go to address details. As you can see here, in the form, this is the out of the box code, which means that this is HTTP continue. How we can get into, how can we populate a value into this action using the URL utils.http continue. Now, this variable, you can use mapping to this variable. This is variable, which is a continue URL. We assigned it an address/form. This is the method that will handle all the actions from this form. Now we need to handle create and cancel actions, as you can see here. Now, we need to define this inside the address controller. Sorry. Now, we need to export it because we need to use it from ISML. So this is the form. We need to put a post here. We need to use a post because we are using sensitive data or a form that is very important data. We need to use HTTPS, and it also required to be login and then use CSRF. This is a token that is here mentioned because this pipeline is used CSRF validate and then CSRF validate. Then we need to mention that we cannot use the form method without CSRF token. Then we can mention this as a string into ensure of guard. Then after this, we can identify or implement the handle form. Okay, handle form, just get the model of the address. Now, how we can handle the form of this XML. Now, we can go to this form and take this name of the form. This is in this form is using the profile.address. Now go to the profile XML, which is the definition of the forms. Now we need to see the address. Okay, search for the address. This address is, its name is customer address. So now go to your controller. Then we need use the app and .get form. Here just we get all the forms and then we just pass the name of that form. This is the name, customer address. Then we need to add handle, how to handle the action by using .handle action of that form. Now each line of this, it's represent an action, which is create, cancel. You can see here cancel and create. There is also edit, error, and remove. Because of this action is used by another sub-pipelines, such as I think here in the edit, yeah, there's an edit and remove and create, as you can see here. Okay, now what create does? As you can see here, first of all, we need to make sure that CSRF is passing through the handling of the action. Then we need to create a customer. These are pipelets, out of the box pipelets. So, and then update the object with the form, then update the object with the form. First of all, let's take this, this pipelet, okay? This pipelet will create a customer address. This pipelet take the address ID and the customer as an input, and then give us the output, which is address. Okay, let's go to our table. We can find this, the equivalent JS script for this pipelet as dw.customer.addressbook.createAddress. Now, we are actually using the model here because of that we need to use like reusable functionality. So this is the model of address. Let's search for it. Okay. And then this is a helper function. But I just need to clarify more about the pipelet and where we use the equivalent JS. This is the equivalent JS create address. So this is this line of code that represent this pipelet. Now there is a T, which means that this is a transactional pipelet. So how we can migrate transactional into pipeline? We just open using a transactional, which is a global variable to trap, and then write everything inside it. So because of this is a transactional and another transactional, so we can put them in one transactional wrapper. Okay, the next one is update object with form. This means that we need to take it from the table. Okay. This is a copy to that, which is means update object with form. We have a form that we update an object with it. So here we have this form, okay, and we have this object. And then they said here just use a copy method from group, from form group. Now go back to here. We have a form group, which is we get it from the form module. You just need to pass it an address form and then use a copy to method, as you can see here. Mhm. And this is for a state as well. This is the state. We just need to copy this form into this object. Okay, now let's go back to our create handling, and then after this we need to check if this is Ajax call or not. Okay, then if it's Ajax, we need to load the success JSON. If not, we need to use an address slash list. Now here, actually, they did like a redirect rule to add the address add, but instead of this, we need to implement this is out of the actions. Because the action here, it should be like redirect. If there is any Ajax call, it will call it directly, okay, and without do any redirect, then it will go to this render require to render the JSON and then get back to the view. Okay, let's take another example. Okay, let's take set default as another example that we can migrate a script or a DS script into a pipeline, into a controller. Sorry. We have here set default. Set default, which means that this is a call node. As we mentioned before, we need to use guard in order to export it, and it's a public. It's required a login. As you mentioned, as we can notice here from configurations. Then after that, we have a get customer address. Okay, we can it's a pretty straightforward thing, like search for this pipelet, and then we can get the address from this is an equivalent JS code for this get customer address pipelet. Okay, now let's go back to the set default. Okay, let's see. We can get the address. Yeah, this is from address book. As we mentioned before, the current customer should be as a customer, and then the profile.address book, we get this address book. Then we need to get the address. Now here, the address book, sorry, we can use this get address as we mentioned here. Now we have this DS file. Before we the rule of here, just we need to convert all DS files into JavaScript files. But if you need to ask yourself a question before you do this step, if this DS file is used by several sub-pipelines or several sources, then you need to convert it into a lone JS file. If there is one pipeline that is using this DS file, then you need to migrate it to JS and mix this code with the controller method. Okay, let's dig in deeper into the set default address. So what we have here import package. Yeah, instead of using import package, we need use require in the controllers or scripts. What makes us use required? What gives us the the features of using require, which means that the require is only load the exported functions, whereas the import package and import scripts, it's only loads all the functions, and all the data will get loaded into global context. So this will give us a more performance in our execution time. Okay, now let's go ahead with the set default address, and here we get the customer address, and then the customer, the current customer, and we get the address book from custom.profile.address book, and then set preferred address. This is what we do in this DS file. Okay, and this DS file is a transactional file. As you can see here in the configurations, is set to true. So we need to open and transactional transaction.wrap. Then we need to take the address book and then use the set preferred address to this address book. After that, we are calling a jump node. This jump node, how we can represent it in the controller, we need to use a redirect rule from response. Just a pretty straightforward line. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, I think there's no questions. So at the end, we need actually to take care of each line of the in the pipeline. We need to walk through all the sub-pipelines step by step, but you can actually use the site genesis controllers as you need actually to take care of the client's customizations. Then you need to re-implement them into your controllers. And that's all for this session.